and welcome again to the Midweek. We're so glad that you've joined us. Well, this past weekend, Tim talked to us about someone from the Bible who you may have never even noticed before. He talked to us about Deborah. We talked about courage and learning styles. Just take a look at this.
You all know how we have like different learning styles, right? We learn differently. Some of you are visual learners. You have to see it. You think in images, you think in word pictures, like you're just a visual learner. Others of you, you're oral learners. You would rather hear it. You'd rather listen to an audiobook than actually read one on paper. Some of you are kinesthetic learners. You learn through movement. Now, I won't out which of my two sons this was, but one of my boys had a breakthrough moment in second grade when his teacher finally looked at him and said, listen, when you're doing schoolwork here in class, just ditch the chair. It's fine. It's fine. He was having such a hard time sitting down, and so he could get up and he could move around while he was doing his work, and it helped him because that was one of the ways that he learned. He's a kinesthetic learner. Okay, so some of you learn that way. Some of you learn through art, through music, through song, through those kinds of things. Listen, this is all a part of how God wired you.
So I'm not going to guess which of your sons that was.
Well, I have to make a fact check.
Oh.
I got home from teaching Sunday afternoon, and as soon as I walked in the door, it wasn't, hi, Dad. It wasn't, hey, the message was great. It was, Dad, it's first grade, not second grade. So I remember now it was Mrs. Hannikin, one of my son's first grade teachers, and so I apologize
Big
for
difference.
Not getting that right
Big
this weekend.
difference. My husband fact-checked me one time because for 3 years we celebrated my daughter's birthday on the wrong day. I thought she was born on the 28th. And she was born on the 29th.
Did you have to go look at the birth certificate to get?
We opened her baby book. And I did it to correct him because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't remember what day your daughter was born. Oh my gosh.
You had the wrong day.
She was 3.
She did not tell me that story in rehearsal.
We celebrated her well on the wrong day.
Okay.
So you get a pass for not knowing if your son was in the first. Sorry, I saved those for you. When we're actually.
We actually have people watching. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So learning styles.
Yes. Yeah. So we all have different learning styles. They're visual, oral. I probably am more of a visual learner. I like seeing things. I can't, if I'm just listening and not watching, then it's really easy for me to tune out.
It's interesting, when we were learning French, when Jim and I were living in France, if we'd hear a new phrase, he would always say, can you write that for me? And I would always say, can you say that one more time?
Oh, wow.
And I would have it.
So there it is in real time.
So just the opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, I don't know if this is a learning style, but I know for sure that you don't multitask very well.
No, I don't. And I think I mentioned that. We were talking about note-taking this weekend, and I don't. Well, if we're in a conversation.
If you look down at your phone, we stop talking.
I'm out.
Because it's like he can't hear and look at the phone at the same time.
I can't. But I finally, I found out, first of all of you multitaskers, multitasking is not a thing. Your brain doesn't multitask. Some people can switch back and forth from one thing to another more quickly, but it's still not technically what we would think of as multitask, like literally doing two things at once.
Yeah.
But I got to a point, I just finally went, you know what? This is the way I'm wired, and I honestly operate better when I just focus on one thing. And so I have to make myself do that.
So, for example, during a church service, a lot of us sit there and take notes. For me, it helps me remember if I write things down, even if I don't go back and read it later.
Yeah.
To have written it down helps me. But for you, that's distracting.
I have to be engaged, locked into what the person's. I even remember in college, with lectures and that kind of thing, I had to lock in and engage with what was being said, and then I would later try to find ways to write down and jot down some things to help me.
Because you need to really just listen to it.
It's got to conceptually make sense to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I like to take notes, but then if you take it a level further, you have people like Shelby, who took notes for you this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
And that's just a whole nother level. That's just a whole nother level of creativity and how she remembers and
is.
puts it together. And
Can we show the notes? Oh, we're showing them now. So if you look at this, I just thought this was so beautifully done, and you can see it kind of popping in and out. She's got layers that she's adding in there as she writes it. But one of the things I appreciate about Shelby's artistry here as she takes these notes is there's a feminine quality to them in a really beautiful way.
Yeah.
And so she really, just her notes are bringing out the whole spirit of the story of Deborah to me. And so it was really cool to be able to share that that with her as she kind of shared those notes.
And I bet Shelby would say this helps her listen better.
Yeah.
It helps her to listen better, to be writing.
I think so. So she's a note taker. And I would also say, I would predict that also means Shelby's more of a kinesthetic learner, that
Right.
that even just the physical act of writing things out and doodling and that kind of things helps her pay attention, helps her retain the information.
Yeah, we're just all so different. That's
I know.
just so interesting.
Well, and so that's one of the ways God wires us. And so that's one of the ways we get to celebrate and learn from each other is with our different learning styles.
Right. So we want to ask a question. We want you to talk to each other about your learning style. And do you know what your learning style is? It's important, I think, to know.
It is. I can't wait to see
Yeah.
who we have watching the midweek, what kind of learners we have there, and we'll kind of learn about each other through this. It'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Like, do you have your AirPods in walking around? Do you sit and pay attention?
Yeah.
How do you listen and learn better?
Well, again, it's all these different voices that we get to experience and hear from as a church community. And that is
Right.
actually even what's been cool and is going to continue to be an interesting thing with this series we're in, Ancient, Present, Future Faith, of talking about these heroes. We're hearing from a bunch of different voices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a chance to teach. We got to hear from Ben Horstman, I think it was last weekend, David Hawkins the weekend before that. Greg is in there, but we're going to hear from some more voices in the weeks to come. And I get to see kind of a sneak preview of what people are going to be teaching on and sharing. And
Well, you
I
didn't
can't
mention
wait.
that, mine is going to be one of those voices.
I was going to get to it. I didn't get there fast enough. Yeah, so you're going to share a story, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to surprise us, or do you want to tell us who
No,
you're
I'll
going to be
surprise
teaching?
you, and here's why.
Okay.
Do you know how many people I have talked to since Sunday, talking about your sermon from this weekend, have said, I have never noticed Deborah in the Bible before, ever. Or if they had, it was so fast, and how you compared the two ways that it talks about her.
Yeah.
That was really, so many people have said, I never heard her story before.
Well, that's something, isn't it? I've had the same thing. I think everyone I've talked to, I've yet to have somebody come up and say, I've studied Deborah before. That's not the conversation. It's, I didn't know this story.
And we learned a lot from her story. You
Yeah.
took a really deep dive.
Well, I had never heard much of the story either, and so we really did. We got to go deep, and I love the way, speaking of learning styles, you've got the prose version and the poem version right next to each other, and then there really are these word pictures in it. And so that was what I was, when I say it was a 21st century way of telling a story, it really was
beautiful.
so
Yeah.
amazing to me. So
The one thing I've always said about Deborah, because I have never understood that deep a dive as you took, comparing the mothers and all those things, was so awesome. But what I love about Deborah's story is that she was a woman who settled disputes.
yeah.
And and I challenge women, what if we were all women who settled disputes?
Yeah.
And we showed up and disputes stopped.
Yeah.
And that's quite a challenge.
She's an impressive and courageous woman. One of the things that really stood out to me as I was learning about the story is that, we talk about courage, and courage isn't, you've heard this before, right? Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is you're fearful, but you do it anyway. You do it in spite of the fear. And Deborah was that way. Barak, the other character, was that way. When he knows he doesn't stand a chance against Sisera's army, just doesn't stand a chance. And so he even looks at Deborah and says, what you quoted a minute ago, right? I won't go unless you go. And she goes, which is courageous. And so it's all over this story.
And so each person in the story was probably the least likely. They were underdogs.
They were all
right?
underdogs.
They were the least likely. It was all the odds were against them.
Yeah, you've got Deborah, who's disadvantaged because she's a woman in a male-dominated society. You've got Barak, who's disadvantaged because he's outnumbered by these chariots. And then you have the people of Israel who are at a disadvantage because they've broken the covenant with God. And so, who's to say whether God will keep his end of the covenant?
Right.
Now, we know God. We know he will. But it's amazing to me. And so, they're all struggling with this. Yeah.
In fact, we have another clip. Can we watch
Oh, okay.
another clip of this weekend? Watch
Sure.
this.
Maybe you're in a place now where you feel like Deborah or Barak or the people of Israel, you're the underdog. And you look at the problems that you're facing or whatever it is that's going on in your life and you're going, I don't stand a chance. I don't have what it takes. I'm not strong enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't have it. I can't do this. I'm not the right kind of person. Listen, if you feel discouraged or overwhelmed these days, if you're struggling with doubt or fears about the future, or if you can't seem to shake the shame of your past, if you're going through the fog of what this last year has been and going, I can't even put the pieces of my life together right now. I feel like I'm going through a storm that is bigger than I have control over, and I'm struggling with whether or not I have the ability to step into this. Maybe you're like Deborah and you see an injustice that is around you and you want to do something about it, but you go, who am I? How can I have the strength to do this? If that's you, this story's for you. And if you get right down to it, the truth of the matter is this is all of us, because we are all, if we're honest, caught up in the same cycle as the Israelites are in Judges.
So when you look at all these disadvantages in the way that they're, we all can kind of feel that way at times. And sometimes it's a matter of looking at the challenges that we face and going, these are too big. I don't know how I can possibly have the strength to face them. I don't know how I can actually move into this. And we wanted to kind of have a conversation on the midweek about what it looks like to face big challenges, even when they're big, even when they're daunting. And so for that reason, I was really excited for us to be able to invite one of my friends to have the conversation. And so Amanda Chenoweth is here with us on the midweek. Amanda, thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can we just start by telling us a little bit about, you working on our outreach team, you kind of oversee that kind of, leg of the ministry here at the Crossing. Will you, for those of us who may not know, tell us what outreach is and kind of what our philosophy is behind how we approach this?
Sure. So I speak about our local partnerships. We approach those in a way that is with unity and with relationship and empowering people who are doing good things already. So, for example, if we thought we were being called into working with refugees, we're probably not going to start our own refugee ministry. We're going to go find the experts who are doing it already and come alongside them. And when we do that, we come with open hands and say, how can we help you? We don't come in and say, we think you need to do X, Y, Z. It's we love what you're doing. How can we be a part of this?
Yeah. There's such a cool spirit behind that, and we didn't arrive at that lightly, right? That's been a long conversation.
Yes.
But just help us more with kind of, some of the philosophy of why we think that's so important. Like if we see refugees in the city of St. Louis, what's to keep us as a church from just starting a refugee ministry?
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing is, if you've been around long enough and you've heard Greg talk or read any of his books, we really are about unity, right? And St. Louis is a very historically divided city in so many different ways and shapes. Right. And God calls us to be about unity. So we are about unity. And how do we do that? Well, partnering with somebody, right? Like, I don't have to explain that, right?
Yeah.
Pooling our resources for empowerment and working toward that. There's that. But then there's also the relationship piece. So when we're going at it alone, we're relationshipless, essentially, right? But when we have somebody else, we get to hear the stories, we get to relate to what people are going through. And relationship is what creates life change.
Right.
And life change is ultimately what can change the
A
big
community,
problems.
right? And the big problems.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
So what's cool is that, what's not so cool but really cool is this last year, particularly for the outreach ministry, has been a really challenging year.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk about how COVID has affected how we do outreach, but then also a little bit share how what you were just saying, this idea of relationship building and that kind of thing, has really been what's turned it around.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
So, In general, we partner with about 4 to 6 local organizations and then 4 schools. Across the board, we had different ways that people could come along with us. So if you sit in our seats, come with us and be a part of what we're doing in a variety of ways. When COVID hit, our partners all had to shut down, but they were also serving the really vulnerable communities. So, you and I are affected. The people they serve were affected 100 times more. So they really couldn't shut down long term. The need was higher, but they couldn't bring volunteers into it because of COVID. So the ability to respond to the need was just a lot harder.
Yeah.
So really, when we did the whole, well, what can we do? How can we help? It was just these physical needs. They needed more clothing, and they needed school supplies for at-home learning, and they needed personal hygiene items and the things that were being hoarded, like toilet paper.
Yeah.
They couldn't get it.
So they could be there physically.
Yeah.
And you got to resource them.
Yes,
Which is a
yeah.
beautiful thing.
And then one of the really neat things in what you're asking about relationally is we meaning this team that I work with here, our staff team, we've worked really hard at building relationships with the staff at our schools and organizations. And really, we spent a lot of time pastoring them. So we got to a point where they would call and say, will you just pray for me? Or I'm having a hard time today, or can I just tell you what I'm facing? We did things like just ordering lunch, We had one of my staff ordered Grubhub gift cards for all of our teachers who were teaching from home at one of our schools, and stress relieving little baskets, just little tiny things that said, we see you, we know this is hard, keep going,
Yeah.
So when you talk about unity, not only is it we're doing it together,
Yeah.
but for those who are serving, if you hadn't had a relationship with them, you couldn't have supported them in that way.
That's right.
And so that came before them being able to ask you for
That's right.
for like emotional support.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's because of those kinds of experiences and sharing in that relationship that we get to say, like, we love our partners. We love the ministries that we get to serve alongside and do this with because of, and not just ministries, but all the organizations we get to work with.
Yeah.
Because we've built relationship with them.
That's right.
Yeah. And we've had what turned into a really good year. We got to see some really cool stuff. And
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, we actually shared a video that you and your team with the video team put together to just celebrate all that God did in 2020.
Yeah.
And I'd love for folks to see it again. Do you mind if we show it? All right, watch
do it.
this.
It may not seem like it, but 2020 was a good year.
Yes, it was filled with relentless challenges and significant loss, and we don't take that lightly.
But these challenges gave us an opportunity to be for the Lou.
To enter into God's redemptive story in our community. Just look at all God did through you, the Crossing family. Bermuda Elementary School here in North St. Louis County serves students pre-K through 2nd grade. In the spring of 2020, we were able to give each one of them 282 students workbooks so they can continue to work from home during this pandemic.
Oasis International is a Christian organization that serves refugees right here in St. Louis. This past summer, we teamed up with other churches to make phone calls to refugees in our community to provide them with English and computer skills in order to help them apply for unemployment. When the challenges of COVID left us unable to resume our usual Reading Champions program at Walbridge STEAM Academy, the team quickly pivoted to what we're now calling Adopt an Educator. Volunteers were assigned to a teacher to encourage for the school year. The principal at Walbridge shared with us that what began as simple words of support from the Crossing has generated an attitude of positivity for the whole school, as teachers have felt seen, encouraged, and loved by people they didn't even know.
Beer Bomb Elementary School, in walking distance of our Grand Trail campus. They serve about 600 students, half of which are refugees. On a bitterly cold November morning, we had volunteers come out here and build this Gaga pit to provide more play space for kids to spread out during recess.
A lot happened in 2020, and God moved in extraordinary ways. While it was challenging, we can honestly look back and say it was a good year. Thanks to you.
So thank you so much, all of you who helped us just do that and were a part of all of our outreach efforts this last year. It's been really profound to watch how we've been able to move into that. But Amanda, I want to kind of turn the corner maybe back to Deborah just a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I want to have this conversation with you is when you think about the challenges you face in your corner of ministry, they're these big, huge, scary challenges that most of us look at and go, this is too much. We can't fix, like I had to look it up, but Richard Stearns has said, like, the thing about poverty that you have to understand is when we think we have simple solutions to poverty, there are no simple solutions because poverty is rocket science.
That's right.
It's really complicated to try to figure out how to move into it and make a difference and that kind of thing. And so I'd love to hear you talk about, as somebody who oversees that area of ministry, what would you say to people who, when they're confronted with these really big problems, feel like they lose their courage in the midst of it?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I lose my courage at least once a year, maybe more. The world was big and scary in terms of poverty and least of these type ministry before COVID hit, and then COVID hit, and it's 100 times. Yes. I mean, it's just unfathomable. For me, what I have done is I have people around me, right, that pull me out of bed when I don't want to get out of bed, that remind me of the little ways that God is showing up, or even the big ways that God is showing up. Those people are important. The other thing is, when I look at a big issue, I ask myself, what can I do? What is my corner of the world, right? So like child hunger is a really big deal across the nation. It has been for years. I can't solve child hunger. I can't, right? But I can feed a kid at my child's school. So there's going to be somebody who can't pay their school lunch bill, but the school feeds them anyway, and the lunch bill gets bigger and bigger. I can call the school and say, who has the biggest bill? I want to pay for it. Right? So I haven't solved child hunger, but I've solved hunger for a child for now. And that's my piece, right? That's what I can do.
Grandparents can do that too.
That's right.
You can call your grandchild's school
That's right.
and say, who can I feed?
I recently found out I was paying a bill for my kid because she's a kindergartner, so we're new parents, right? I went on and found out that our school district actually has a fund for school lunches that you can just go donate to whenever you want to, and they use it to pay off.
Good to know.
It's there, right?
So there's something you can do.
That's right.
There.
It's, yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard a preacher say once, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone.
That's right.
And at least do it for one.
That's right.
And it makes a difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is right. Because if we all did for one, a lot of ones would be taken care of, right?
Yeah.
That
It
adds up.
Yeah, it really does. And
Yep.
so that's a part of what you're doing then, is just trying to figure out how to collectively bring a bunch of ones together, right? And
Yeah.
say, okay, now let's go and step into these things.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So anything else you would want to tell us about, like, just for somebody who's listening to this and going, okay, how can I take a step? How can I move into this?
Yeah, so one of the things I got from Deborah's story this weekend, it was very personal for me for a variety of reasons, is she's sitting under this tree, right? Now, I'm no theologian, so please feel free to check my accuracy. We don't know how she gets underneath of this tree, but I imagine that God just said, go sit under that tree, right? There's nothing in the story about her walking around looking for disputes to settle. God said, go to this tree, and he brings them to her, right? She didn't go looking for Brock. Brock was brought to her. So I feel like if you find your tree, right, go where God is telling you, that one little step, he's going to show you the one. He's going to show you the little snippet of the world that you can make a difference in.
Right.
Often through relationships too.
That's right. So you just have to pay attention and be
That's right.
available,
Yeah.
Yep.
and have the courage to take a step whenever
That's right.
whenever somebody comes your way.
That's
that's great.
beautiful. And I love that. I mean, we can take note because Amanda noticed something in the sermon that you didn't even mention.
Yeah.
And so God can speak to each one of us.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
we need to always be open to God speaking to us
It's so
in a real
great.
personal way.
And we don't know how she ended up under that tree settling
Yeah.
disputes. She just enters the scene, and there she is.
There she is.
And so I think you're absolutely right. I think at some point she has the ability to judge rightly between disputes and that kind of thing. And pretty soon, people start going, have you talked to Deborah? You ought to go talk to Deborah. She can help you solve this problem. And now here she is judging all of Israel. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So what your point is right on. I love that. It's so good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's, let me just say this, Amanda. I just am so grateful for the work that you do, and any opportunity that we get to celebrate everything that God's doing through the outreach ministries, we're going to take that opportunity. So
That's right.
So thank you so much for taking
we
that
watched
time.
your team just jump into action.
They're amazing, aren't
Everything
they?
went into quarantine.
They're
You guys
incredible.
just kept finding ways.
Yeah.
And but what you talk about, paying attention, moving into things, at least do it for one, it reminds me of something you said this weekend. And I do think we have a clip of it. If we can go to another clip, watch this.
Now, let's go. Because there's work to be done. There's things I'm calling you into, that stuff in your life that you see, the injustices, the places where you see things that are wrong that need to be made right. I'm the one who's going to get the victory. I'm the one who's going to do this. All the glory and honor and praise will go to me at the end of all of this, but you're going to do it with me. We're going to do this side by side. You and I, we're going to work together in this world to bring about the kingdom of God that we so desperately long for. And so like Deborah and like Barak, God gives us strength and courage, and we find hope in our days. And this is how the story goes forward. He's calling each of us into the story, and we have an opportunity to respond confidently, boldly, with strength.
Well, that right there was why Amanda was the perfect person to be with us
Yeah.
tonight, because she's talking about taking a courageous step forward, even if he's saying do it for this one. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about responding boldly, because God's going to do it through us.
He is.
I mean, He's chosen to invite us into the story of changing people's lives or setting a nation free or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at a story like Deborah's and you're getting ready to do what I did this weekend to help people with it and walk through it as a teach, there's certain things you really feel like are speaking to you out of the story and you want to convey. And for me, it was this idea that God calls us to step into the story and make a difference. And oftentimes it's the really hard places where He's calling us to step into. And it can feel like it's overwhelming. It's more than we can do. But He empowers us,
Right.
And so we're faithful with the little things, and then He begins to add more to that. And He adds His strength to it. And that's where things really take off. So
Right.
can I tell you a story
about
one of our pastors? You guys, a lot of you know who Russ Kirkland is. If you don't, he was considered by many to be like a founding pastor of this church. We love Russ, and I got a chance to spend a lot of time with him early on when I started working here and before he retired. And I'll never forget we were having a conversation sitting on a friend's deck one evening and just talking, and we were talking about doing things that are hard. I was getting ready to head into a project or something like that, and I was like, man, this is really, really hard. And he said two things like back to back that seemed to totally contradict each other, but were both true. And it was so profound that it shook me in the moment. But one of the things he said, Tim, what God's calling you into, of course it's hard. He wouldn't call you into it if it was easy. If it was just something easy, then big deal. He's going to call you into things that are hard. And then I kind of just responded with, well, I think that makes sense, Russ. But what I notice is a lot of times when I take the first couple of steps, it's not as hard as I was afraid it was going to be. And this is where Russ, he looked at me and he laughed and he goes, that's because Jesus did it for you. And it was like, this is why Jesus says my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Because when He sees the things in the world and He goes, now let's go, we're going to go do this together. Mm-hmm. He adds His strength to it. So He's the one who brings the rains down and floods the river and washes those chariots away.
Right. But when you're at the place of saying yes to what He's called you to, you don't see that part.
No.
To say yes, to take a step, takes a lot of courage. And that's not the only place in the Bible where we see God showing up in huge ways.
Yeah.
For the underdogs, for those who had the odds stacked against them. Showing up also, you mentioned, to say, yes, you broke covenant. I'm still showing up.
I'm faithful.
Yes, you haven't disqualified yourself. Yes, I'm still in the game with you. Yes, I'm still with you. But taking that first step, or even like Amanda said, doing something for one child or one neighbor or one person, you don't see that part until you've taken the step.
Right. Greg talks about, even in his book, Never Settle, he talks about chain reactions. And it's that kind of thing where you take a little step and then the dominoes begin to fall. And so you don't always know the effect you're going to have on this world by just showing up and doing the thing,
Yeah.
the little thing that maybe is in front of you to do.
Right. And it may be something you never see
That's right.
the full effect of.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So that to me is really, really helpful and something that that I'm definitely learning more about, and our hope is that you are as well. But it really comes back down to that blessing that Deborah ends her song with. And so I just want to kind of close with this blessing again and throw this your way. But when we talk about strength, we understand that it is God's strength that is doing it. But when we show up in obedience, when we show up in faithfulness, then He moves through us and we get to be a part of that. And so with that in mind, as we go, here's what I would say to you. May you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. God bless you, and we will see you this weekend.